Değerli misafirlerimiz, Keynote Discussion platformumuza hoş geldiniz. Az sonra Hong Kong MTR Başkan Yardımcısı Sayın LEONG'u dinleme şansımız olacak ama öncesinde kendilerinin takdimi için Sayın Osman Mardin'i kürsüye davet ediyorum efendim.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to be able to welcome to Turkey one of the global leaders of his field, the Deputy Chief Executive of Hong Kong MTR, Mr. Leong, who has driven the Hong Kong MTR strategy, especially its rail and mall strategy, which he's going to speak about, for the past 10 years. And the current result of that, and it's still increasing, the current point of that is that the Hong Kong MTR is a $20 billion market cap company with cutting-edge customer service and consistently increasing earnings per share. Without further ado, allow me to welcome Mr. Leong.
Thank you, Osman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this conference. It really has been a superb conference, and it's great to be back in Istanbul. What I'd like to do over the next 20 minutes or so is to give you an introduction to the company I work for, MTR, talk a little bit about our business model, which, as Osman had said, is rail as well as property development, and then talk a little bit more about the stakeholder relationships that we have, particularly with our largest shareholder, the Hong Kong government. What I'd like to do is really to start off by way of history, where MTR started, getting on to 30 years ago. You can see from this chart that we started as a wholly owned entity of Hong Kong government. Our first rail line was built in Hong Kong, finished in 1979. It's now 30-odd years old. Quite soon after that, we embarked on property development, which will be above our rail stations. Then we added what we call station commercial activities. These are advertising shops and station that sell anything from Starbucks coffee to dry cleaning. We were listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange and semi-privatized by the Hong Kong government in the year 2000. Hong Kong government still remains our largest shareholder. We started our expansion outside of Hong Kong. Today we operate in 6 cities outside of Hong Kong. We started that expansion in 2003. And lastly, in 2007, we merged with the other rail company in Hong Kong, KCRC. The other rail company is wholly owned by Hong Kong government, was wholly owned by Hong Kong government. We merged with them, became one company. Before talking more about our company, what I'd like to do is to describe our business model, the rail and property model. The first question is, why do we need such a model in the first place? You can see from this chart that rail development is unlike many other projects. There's very heavy capital expenditure, that red line you see there, in the initial years. That heavy capital expenditure lasts throughout the life of the rail development. There are significant upgrading and enhancements that's required across the system as the system ages. This is very unlike a normal operating company where there would be relatively smaller capital expenditure up front and steady returns thereafter. That is highlighted in the blue line that you see on that chart. However, what we found is that rail development, passenger rail development, creates a lot of external benefits. These external benefits actually are not captured by many of the passenger rail companies. What we've done in the rail and property model is to capture external benefits internally within the company. And this is how our model works. Very simply, as I mentioned, passenger rail cannot make financial returns. It cannot make its ends meet. We integrate rail development with property development. The property development enhances the returns that we get from our rail development. The process that we use is a negotiation with our major shareholder, the Hong Kong government, to get land rights from them. What a lot of people confuse us with is that we actually don't get the land for free. We actually have to pay for the land. However, we get a discounted land premium, and that discounted land premium is how we capture the external value internally. We end up working with developers. We work with all the major developers in Hong Kong, and we share profits with them. We share profits either in the form of getting dollars and cents, alternatively in getting a hard asset like a shopping center. That business model has allowed us to achieve what we are today. What we, MTR, what we are today is we're a listed Hong Kong company, market capitalization over 20 billion US dollars, 160 billion Hong Kong dollars. Last year, we made just around 1.3 billion US dollars. Those earnings are quite evenly distributed between our rail business, highlighted in green there. That made 20% of our 1.35 billion. Our station commercial business made another 20%. All the shopping centers that we got from our rail and property model gave us another 20%. And property development, where we are selling apartments above our rail stations, that got us 40% of our profits. So $1.35 billion of profits last year. What that rail and property model has also done is to build out a network in Hong Kong. For those who have visited Hong Kong, our network spans most of Hong Kong. It is 218 kilometers, 10 rail lines, and more under development. I'll talk a bit more about the lines that we have under development. What we also have is, in addition to having this relatively large network, we have a financial profile on our rail operations, which on a margin basis is one of the highest in the world. Our rail operations deliver margins which are in the mid-40%. At the same time, despite the intensity of use of our system, our operating costs and our maintenance costs has been kept relatively steady over the last 4 or 5 years. In terms of our operational activities in Hong Kong, today we carry around 4.9 million passenger trips a day. Last year, we carried around 1.7 billion passengers. I was looking at the website for Istanbul Metro. Last year, Istanbul Metro carried around 140 million. So we are a little bit bigger than the current metro system here. And in terms of performance, in terms of punctuality, we have a record of 99.9%. It is one of the highest in the world. I mentioned that beyond what we're doing in Hong Kong with our 218 kilometers, we're adding another 56 kilometers between now and the end of this decade. That'll take us to a route network in Hong Kong of around 270 kilometers. That new addition of 56 kilometers will cost an additional 23 billion US dollars. I mentioned the station commercial business, which is our advertising business, our shops in our stations. Well, these businesses last year gave us revenues of around 3.3 billion Hong Kong dollars. That is around 400 million US dollars in revenue. What we're very proud of is the chart that you see on my left-hand side. The dark blue line shows the amount of commercial revenue that we get per passenger. I mentioned that we carry 4.9 million passenger trips a day. Each one of those passenger trips effectively adds another 2 Hong Kong dollars. That's around 25-30 cents US to our bottom line. We rely on them to spend in our shops. We rely on them to look at our advertising. That gets us the revenues. The light blue line in that chart shows the station commercial businesses, the revenue from these businesses as a percentage of our rail revenue. It's running around 25%. The rail and property model has allowed us to develop quite a large portfolio of predominantly retail shopping malls. Today, our rental portfolio is 250,000 square meters, roughly 2.83 million square feet of rental properties. These properties are above our rail stations and our depots. Most of our properties, as highlighted in that pie chart, would be in shopping malls. We own 13 shopping malls in Hong Kong. We also own a large chunk of one of the best office buildings in Hong Kong, highlighted in blue in that pie chart. The revenue that we've been getting from all these shopping centers and office rental, once again last year, 3.2 billion US dollars, Hong Kong dollars, roughly 400 million US dollars, a significant enhancement to our bottom line. Beyond just the property rental that we just discussed, we have a very large property development portfolio. That development portfolio over the last 30 years of our history has developed into 43 individual sites, 13 million square meters. That's around 150 million square feet that we and our partners have developed over the last 30-odd years. Looking forward, we have a remaining land bank that's around 2.3 million square meters. That would be developed now over the next 10 years. You can see on this chart, and not surprisingly, all our property development are above or adjacent to our rail stations or our rail depots. And these are large developments. For those who have visited Hong Kong, you may be familiar with names like Kowloon Station, where above our station we have a 1 million square foot shopping center, a 2-odd million square feet office building, 6,000 odd apartments, plus 3 hotels. So these are big, big developments above rail stations. Beyond Hong Kong, MTR has, starting from about 10 years ago, been venturing slowly abroad. We're now active in China, we're active in Beijing, we're active in Shenzhen, which is just north of Hong Kong. We're also active in a city called Hangzhou, which is quite close to Shanghai. Outside of Hong Kong and China, we now operate train systems in Melbourne, we operate train systems in Stockholm, and we operate a train system in London. What I'd like to do next is talk a little bit about MTR and our interaction with stakeholders. Very important group of stakeholders would be our shareholders. We were listed by way of government semi-privatization back in the year 2000. Since then, comparing ourselves, which is the blue line you see on that chart, with the yellow line, which is the Hong Kong Hang Seng Index, we have handily outperformed the Hang Seng Index. We've returned to our investors just over 11% compound. The Hang Seng Index has returned about 4.2% in that same time frame. As I mentioned, Hong Kong government remains our largest shareholder, 77%. The rest of the 27% are divided between institutional investors, now at around 8.5%, and retail Hong Kong shareholders at 14%. We have roughly 270,000 retail shareholders in our company. Another very important stakeholder for MTR is Hong Kong government, who, in addition to being our largest shareholder at 77%, is also our policy maker as well as our regulator. In policy making and in regulation, Hong Kong government regulates the quality of our train service. They set our fares in accordance with an agreed legally binding fare adjustment mechanism. They also look at and set the stage for future rail development in Hong Kong. As regulator of the property business, they regulate different aspects of property development across Hong Kong. As our shareholder, Hong Kong government at 77% is committed to own a simple majority of our shares until at least the year 2020. As our shareholder, they appoint 3 of 12 directors on our board. And lastly, as a shareholder, they seek reasonable returns from their investment. And I'll talk a bit more about their returns in the next slide. But importantly, Hong Kong government is also a business counterparty for us. I mentioned that we negotiate new rail lines with the Hong Kong government. We negotiate the amount of land rights that's given to us. Also, we have to negotiate the amount of land price, the so-called land premium, that we have to pay to the Hong Kong government. So our relationship with the Hong Kong government is multifaceted. They are a shareholder, they are a policy maker, they are our regulator, and they are a business counterparty. And what has Hong Kong government and Hong Kong as well as MTR gained from this rail and property model? Well, Hong Kong government being our shareholder and having received all those land prices, the land premium, for an initial investment of around 32 billion Hong Kong dollars, which is about 4 billion US dollars, their total absolute return, including the land premium received, is around 214 billion, 27 billion, 28 billion US dollars. On top of that, they have a rail system in Hong Kong which operates to one of the highest efficiencies in the world. For Hong Kong people, what we have delivered with this rail and property model are reasonable fares. Fares in Hong Kong, the average fare in Hong Kong is less than $1 US. We also have a very modern transportation system. Every year we spend about 500 million US dollars just upgrading, maintaining, and enhancing our rail network. The rail and property model has also delivered quality housing to different communities in Hong Kong. And lastly, for MTR, what the model has delivered is enabled us to be a listed company. It's given our shareholders reasonable returns. And because of that, we have relatively and good staff morale and a very dedicated workforce. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much.